Chaos on a Tucson street as federal immigration agents clashed with protesters following a series of federal raids at a Tucson restaurant chain.
America, federal agents just conducted one of the largest immigration enforcement operations in Arizona history. 46 people arrested across multiple Taco Giro restaurants in southern Arizona as ICE, HSI, IRS, and Border Patrol executed 16 search warrants for immigration and tax violations. But here's what's wild. While agents were arresting people who broke our immigration laws, of course, protesters were blocking the street, kicking federal vehicles, and getting themselves pepper sprayed. And now Arizona's newest congressman is claiming she was attacked by federal agents when she showed up to the raid site.
New developments right here in southern Arizona where a major ICE raid unfolded earlier today.
What is up, guys? Tyson DELACRUZ here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. This story perfectly shows the insanity of how Democrats respond to immigration enforcement. They literally try to block federal agents from doing their job, then cry victim when there are consequences. Let me break down exactly what happened across southern Arizona. Federal agents from ICE, Homeland Security Investigations, and the IRS and Border Patrol executed 16 search warrants at Taco Giro restaurants, 4 in Tucson, 1 in Sierra Vista, and 1 in Casa Grande.
ICE says that federal agents were executing 16 search warrants in southern Arizona today as a part of a, quote, years-long investigation.
46 people were arrested on immigration violations. Think about that number. 46 people working at these restaurant locations who were in the country illegally. This wasn't just a couple undocumented workers. This was systematic employment of illegal immigrants across multiple locations.
ICE says this is one of several sites where they are serving 16 search warrants for immigration and tax violations.
Federal agents were seen carrying out boxes and documents and evidence, loading them into vehicles. This suggests that they found significant evidence of tax fraud and immigration violation. When you're employing dozens of illegal immigrants and not properly reporting their wages or withholding taxes, that's not just an immigration issue. That is tax fraud that affects every American taxpayer. This was a coordinated operation involving multiple federal agencies all working together. That level of coordination doesn't happen for minor violations. This was a major enforcement action targeting what appears to be a systematic pattern of breaking federal immigration and tax laws. And Sheriff Chris Naños confirmed these raids were specifically directed at Taco Giro locations across the region, which tells you this wasn't random. They had specific intelligence about these businesses. Now here's where the story gets absolutely insane. At the Taco Giro location on Grande Avenue near St. Mary's Road, protesters showed up and literally tried to physically block federal agents from leaving. They spilled into Grande Avenue, blocking traffic, and some were caught on camera kicking unmarked federal vehicles. Let me ask you something. What exactly did these protesters think was going to happen? You can't physically block federal law enforcement officers from doing their job. You can't kick their vehicles. You can't create a mob scene that prevents agents from safely leaving the area. That is obstruction of justice, and there are consequences for that behavior.
ICE says they took in multiple people into custody, but the final numbers are still pending. Agents used tear gas to clear the crowd.
And you know what? That is exactly what's going to happen to people who try to physically interfere with law enforcement operations. This wasn't peaceful protest. This was active obstruction. One protester told reporters, "Wherever you're at, as soon as you see it, my heart stops and drops." But here's my question. Why does your heart stop when you see immigration enforcement? If you're here legally, if you're following the law, why would you be afraid of federal agents doing their job?
But protesters blocked the right of way.
I heard what happened. And then I see all these clowns over here doing that. You know, this is disrespectful to them.
Eventually, backup units arrived to clear the way.
Tucson police had to be called in to escort federal agents out of the area because the situation became so chaotic. TPD made it clear in their statement that they did not deploy any munitions, didn't make any arrests, and were only there to help federal agents safely exit. But the fact that backup had to be called shows how out of control these protesters have become.
The Tucson Police Department addresses that point, saying, quote, after deploying chemical munitions at this incident location, federal agents requested emergency support from the Tucson Police Department to assist in exiting the area.
Think about the message this sends. Federal agents are conducting a lawful operation based on search warrants issued by a federal judge, and protesters think they have the right to physically block them from doing their jobs. This is the kind of lawlessness that Democrats have normalized in sanctuary cities. Now, here's the part that's getting national attention. Arizona Congresswoman Adelita Gavilar claims she was pepper sprayed by federal agents when she showed up to the raid site. She said she was just there for lunch at her favorite Taco Giro restaurant when the raid happened.
This is the Taco Giro that I come to all the time. So I was literally coming to lunch.
But here's what the video actually shows. Gavilar wasn't just an innocent bystander getting lunch. She was in front of the crowd, confronting federal agents. She was part of the protest that was blocking agents from leaving. And when agents deployed chemical munitions to clear the crowd, she was in the vicinity.
Representative Adelita Grijalva was at that location and claims she and her staff were pepper sprayed by federal agents when she identified herself as a member of Congress.
I was literally coming to lunch.
A Homeland Security official confirmed that Gavilar was not directly pepper sprayed, but was in the vicinity of someone being sprayed. That is a very different story, my friends, than what she's telling the media. She claims she was targeted as a member of Congress, but the reality is she put herself in the middle of law enforcement operations and experienced the consequences of being part of a crowd that was obstructing federal agents.
Was sprayed in the face by a very aggressive agent.
I was literally coming to lunch.
Pushed around by others when I literally was not being aggressive. I was asking for clarification, which is my right as a member of Congress.
Here's my question. If you are getting pepper sprayed, you got to ask yourself, what are you doing to get pepper sprayed? Were you just standing there peacefully and observant, or were you part of a crowd that was physically blocking federal agents and refusing to disperse when ordered? The video shows agents shooting chemicals near her feet, but she was clearly in front of the crowd confronting agents. This wasn't some unprovoked attack on a member of Congress. This was crowd control during a chaotic situation that, guess what, protesters created. Gavilar immediately went on social media claiming ICE's lawlessness under this administration, operating with no transparency, no accountability, and open disregard to basic due process. But that, my friends, is complete nonsense. These agents had federal search warrants. They were conducting a lawful investigation. The only people operating with no accountability were the protesters who were trying to physically obstruct them. Let's talk about what the protesters are claiming versus what actually happened. One protester said they were hoping to show ICE that Tucson is ready to defend the community.
We're hoping that it shows ICE that Tucson is ready to defend the community. We are ready to defend and, do our best to save our friends and families from being abducted.
These people were arrested by federal law enforcement officers with valid warrants. That is not abduction, my friend. That's law enforcement. But this is the inflammatory language that Democrats use to make it sound like immigration enforcement is somehow illegitimate.
They're targeting small mom and pop businesses that don't have the financial resources to fight back. And so they're looking at I-9s, and that's what they're doing. They're targeting small businesses and people that are helping in our communities in order to try to fill the quota that Trump has given them.
But that is a complete mischaracterization of what's happening. These restaurants were employing 46 people who are in the country illegally. That's not a small oversight. That is a systematic violation of federal immigration and employment laws. They were not properly reporting wages or withholding taxes for dozens of their employees. You're committing tax fraud that affects the American taxpayer.
They are contributing to the community. This is not the way to go about enforcing our laws.
Wherever you're at, as soon as you see it, your heart stops, it drops.
These protesters want to frame this as federal agents attacking innocent small businesses. But the reality is these businesses were breaking federal law on a massive scale. They were undercutting legitimate businesses that follow the rules by employing illegal workers at lower wages without proper tax withholdings. Think about the American citizens and legal immigrants who are trying to find work in these restaurant industries. How are they supposed to compete when these businesses are hiring illegal immigrants? This isn't about compassion. This is about enforcing law and protecting American workers. Tucson Mayor Regina Romero issued an official statement condemning the operation, and her response perfectly captures the insanity of Democrat sanctuary city policies.
Under the Trump administration, unidentified federal agents often intentionally wear clothing with vague words like police to purposefully confuse the public.
The mayor claimed that federal agents wear vague clothing to purposely confuse the public, but the Tucson Police Department issued a statement making it crystal clear. All TBD personnel were in full dark blue patrol uniforms. The federal agents were in their own tactical gear. There was no confusion about who's who here.
ICE will wear police badges, but you will know that they are not our police officers because our police officers show their faces and their names.
Think about what she's saying here. She was proud that Tucson police refused to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. She's celebrating the fact that her city obstructed a lawful federal operation. This is exactly what is wrong with sanctuary city policies. Local Democratic leaders actively work against federal law enforcement instead of cooperating to keep their communities safe. They prioritize protecting illegal immigrants over supporting federal agents who are trying to enforce our immigration laws. For those of you that aren't familiar, let me give you some context about Arizona's illegal immigration situation. Current estimates for 2024 and 2025 suggest Arizona has between, get this, 250,000 to 300,000 undocumented immigrants. Now, that's actually down significantly from the peak of 560,000 in 2008. But still, that is a massive number. Think about what this means. Up to 300,000 people in Arizona who are not supposed to be in this country. That's the equivalent of the entire population of a mid-sized American city. And many of them are working jobs, using services, and living in communities without going through the legal immigration process that millions of people around the world are waiting to complete. While Tucson's Democratic leadership is fighting against immigration enforcement, Pinal County is taking the opposite approach.
Pinal County Attorney Brad Miller says he's the first prosecutor in the state whose investigators will be working hand in hand with federal immigration authorities.
Miller says ICE will get the help of 10 local investigators and his office will get more crime-fighting resources. The focus will be on violent crimes, crimes against children, human trafficking, and drug trafficking. This is exactly the kind of cooperation we need between local and federal law enforcement.
Keeping our communities safe has to include every resource at our disposal.
Pinal County Attorney Brad Miller announced a formal partnership with Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
While we love our ICE partners, some of them come from out of state and are not necessarily connected with our community.
But here's what's really interesting, guys. According to the Arizona Republic, a review of 949 immigration-related cases in Phoenix federal court this year shows that drugs and human trafficking charges account for just 5% of all cases. Illegal re-entry at the border accounts for, get this, 88%. So while Miller is saying they'll focus on serious crimes, the reality is most immigration enforcement involves people who keep illegally crossing the border.
Pinal County Sheriff Ross Teeple's high-intensity traffic enforcement on I-10 during a 4-day period in May yielded 10 people in the country illegally.
The sheriff told Arizona Republic they're not targeting Latinos. They're targeting drivers with traffic infractions and letting the federal government do their job.
What's very concerning is to hear from a sitting sheriff that those are the beginnings of a stop that categorically develop into a different type of enforcement.
Of course, you guys, ACLU is already watching and threatening legal action, but this is exactly what immigration enforcement should look like. Local law enforcement identifies people in this country illegally during routine operations, and federal authorities handle the immigration process. This is not radical profiling. It is enforcing the law. The contrast between Tucson and Pinal County couldn't be clearer. Tucson Democratic leadership actively obstructs federal immigration enforcement and celebrates when their police refuse to cooperate. Pinal County's Republic leadership partners with federal authorities to enhance both immigration enforcement and crime-fighting capabilities. One approach protects illegal immigrants at the expense of law-abiding citizens. The other approach protects communities by enforcing the law. America, this Arizona operation shows exactly what's wrong with how Democrats approach immigration enforcement. Federal agents conduct a lawful operation based on valid search warrants, arrest 46 people who are in the country illegally, virtually and investigate businesses for tax fraud, and Democrats respond by physically blocking agents, kicking federal vehicles, and claiming that they are the victims when there are consequences. Congresswoman Gaviala wasn't pepper sprayed because she was a member of Congress. She was in the vicinity of chemical munitions because she put herself in front of a crowd that was obstructing federal law enforcement. If you're getting pepper sprayed during a law enforcement operation, you need to ask yourself, what were you doing to be in that situation? The protesters want to frame this as federal agents attacking innocent small businesses and families, but the reality is businesses were systematically violating immigration and tax laws. They were employing 46 illegal immigrants, which means they were undercutting legitimate businesses and American workers while committing tax fraud. Arizona still has 250,000 to 300,000 illegal immigrants, despite the number dropping. That shows that enforcement works, but we need consistent, aggressive enforcement to continue reducing those numbers. The Trump administration is delivering on the promise that he ran on. Meanwhile, Pinal County is showing what cooperation looks like. Instead of obstructing federal agents like Tucson's Democratic leadership, they're partnering with ICE to enhance both immigration enforcement and crime-fighting capabilities. That's the model every county in America should follow. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Democrats physically obstruct immigration enforcement, then claim victimhood, while Republican-led counties partner with federal authorities to enforce the law and protect their communities. That's the choice America faces. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.